With Netflix being a potential contender to buy Warner Brothers, the decline in movie theater box office revenue ever since the year 2020, and the rise of streaming in the entertainment medium, people have been asking the question, is cinema dying? Short answer, maybe? Long answer, in 2016 and in 2017 there was $4 billion films. Okay, that number went up in 2018 with 5 movies. And in 2019 there was a record-breaking $9 billion movies released that year. We all know what happened in 2020. Of course, there was no films that year, but in 2021, there was $1 billion movie that was Spider-Man No Way Home. That grossed so much it almost made $2 billion, and then there was 3 movies in 2022. Avatar actually also made $2 billion. In 2023, there was 2, and in 2024, there was 3. The domestic box office has been $11 billion from 2016 to 2019. After that, 2020, obviously we know what happened, had $2 billion in domestic box office totals that year, followed by $4 billion in 2021, $7 billion in 2022, and $8 billion in 2023, 2024, and in 2025. This is the low not yet reached since 2005, which had $8 billion, and 2006 at $9 billion. If you're wanting to know what happened after that, from 2009 to 2014, it was $10 billion. So you look at these numbers, and it's easy to say, well, of course, it's absolutely dying. Well, before we get to the counter of that argument, we're going to just dissect the box office in the state that it's in currently. The films that did good have burned brighter, but fewer. Fewer films are taking off, but are winning big. More $2 billion films than ever before. Films like Spider-Man, while it didn't make $2 billion, got very close. Avatar, Neza 2, and Zootopia being amongst the smaller group of billion-dollar films. Yet, of those billion-dollar films that I just mentioned, most of them, if it's either Avatar or Neza 2's case, made $2 billion, and Zootopia almost made $2 billion, same with Spider-Man. And all of those were in the past 5 years, okay? Something that has not been accomplished since 2015 with Star Wars and 2019 with Avengers Endgame with $2 billion. Infinity War also made $2 billion. But the fact that this is happening more frequently while the box office is actually lower than before is interesting. There's also fewer films being released now than there were back then, so that shows that a large section of the box office revenue is going towards a small demographic of films. What are those films? Well, a lot of them are, let's be honest, nostalgia films. Okay, we're cashing in on stuff from when film was amazing. Hey, remember when you liked going to the movies? We want to bring you back because, again, since 2020, we've had a hard time at the movies. And so they're going, hey, remember all these cool, great moments? You should come back and experience them once again. Not creating a lot of new experiences for people at the movies, but cashing in on old checks from a long time ago. I just made a video on why I think franchise fare is really dwindling in terms of quality, and if you want to watch that video, I'll link it up above. But I think that very much has to do with this conversation because you're cashing in on money for the short-term game, not worrying about how it's going to affect you long term. These legacy sequels, remakes, reboots that don't take any risks are great when you get people back into the movies, but what are they doing in the long run for the reputation of movies being released in theaters? Okay, and I would argue that while it's getting a lot of mainstream people to come back into the movies, your core film fans, the base that has been going since a long time, myself included, are unhappy with a lot of these films. Okay. Not to mention, for a variety of reasons, they've become a lot more expensive to make these movies. Even the films that are winning big still aren't making as much profit as the margin as before 2020. Now here is where things change. Hollywood Reporter released an article recently called Can Gen Z Save Hollywood? And this is a very interesting observation, okay? Because as a Gen Z myself, I can confer that while I went to film school and I have a lot of film fans, almost every single person I know, whether you're a film fan or not, no matter what your interests are, goes to the movies frequently. Okay, and I think that this is just simply becoming a more popular trend and a trend of Gen Z that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But we're also getting more films. You know, we're starting to increase our output when it comes to what studios are delivering to people. We're getting more original films because they're cheaper to make from a lot of indie companies, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the resurgence come from, which we're also going to talk about in a little bit. But also Gen Z is something that really since 2020 hasn't experienced a lot of like a community aspect when it comes to things. And that's just like a wider conversation about Gen Z as a demographic, but especially, you know, growing up, seeing a lot of, you know, in-person, out in real world interactions, and then since 2020, seeing a lot of that stuff dwindle, there's a desperation for more shared experiences in person. And I think that the movies is a great answer to that solution for a lot of people. There's also been a lot of like Gen Z trends trying to go offline and go more analog, and I think that the whole conversation around that, which is a whole separate conversation, but the whole motive behind that of just kind of not spending as much time on the internet and using it for more deliberate and intentional reasons is definitely an element of this conversation. The Hollywood Reporter article backs this up too. Gen Z's desire and need for community is very much at the heart of this discussion. Their search for third spaces. They also are seeing a lot more PG movies. They are also seeing a lot more movies with their families, which I think probably results in the PG movie rise, and are largely motivated by pre-sale tickets. So you're able to guess the box office that these movies are going to be roughly more so ahead of time. So in early 2022, Gen Z became the highest movie-going demographic on the market, okay? And they have grown every single year to 39% at the end of 25, which means that they'll probably reach 40% in 2026, which, by the way, large, very big. That's beside the point that we're getting a lot of very Gen Z directed films this year. And we're going to talk about how studios are kind of answering this question and reacting to this, because again, 40% is a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of people going to the movies this year and a lot of rapid growth with that. Now let's also acknowledge the rise of Letterboxd. Everybody loves Letterboxd. Letterboxd is just like so fun if you are a frequent moviegoer. It's essentially the social media that you can log films on, and that's it. And you can just be friends with, you know, whoever you want to, your close friends. You can follow, like, there's Letterboxd influencers, I don't really know. And you can just log whatever movies you want. You can write a little review. It can be funny. It can be long. You can rate it. You don't have to. You can just say that you've seen it, but it's a good kind of like diaristic approach to logging your films, and it's really, really fun, and it really does create a sense of community within the film space. It's like Goodreads if you're a book reader for film, but you're able to engage a lot more because films are a lot easier to watch. And I think that this also is driven by, for the same reason Goodreads is, to use apps and social media, I think particularly with Gen Z, as a companion to your real world experiences and something that drives the community that you've already created together rather than be your online digital world. And companies are actually using Letterboxd to gauge engagement in films. A24 even said that Charlie XCX's The Moment could have been driven largely by the fact that she has a strong following on Letterboxd. That was mentioned in the Hollywood Reporter article as well. It's not just that they're seeing these PG animated family movies. In 2023, the Oscar Best Picture nominees that were seen in theaters took up a demographic of 5% of the domestic moviegoing total. In 2025, they took up 7%. So there's actually an increase in people seeing these more art house films. And I think that that goes back to the idea of originality within these films. And studios are responding to this, creating younger IPs, video games, YouTube series, and animes to put in theaters. Because if that's your largest audience, you should give them things that they would enjoy. Again, stuff that appeals to their IP. You know, we're going to talk about Marvel in a little bit, but a lot of even just the franchises from even 10 years ago just aren't what's going to bring people out to the movie theaters anymore. Gen Z still very much likes these IP films, but they look completely different. And that's a little bit of a hint of what I think the answer is going to be at the end of this video. But companies like A24 and Neon are using this and capitalizing off of it. You know, Neon has Exit 8 coming out. A24 has the Backrooms movie. These IPs that really appeal to a very specific demographic, but the demographic that's leading the charge in terms of going to the cinemas to see these movies. They're playing into that, and they're finding a lot of success in that. And that's why companies like A24 are making a lot more original films, because they're cheaper to make and you can kind of only make original films if you have a very small budget, but are also creating the resurgence of, again, drawing people to more original films. And also bringing back things like Marty Supreme in the Drama, which is the mid-budget movie, which is so integral and important to the success in the ecosystem of a cinema and the movie industry. Gen Z is also bringing back physical media a lot, particularly with movie DVDs. This DVD sales have dropped 20% every year usually, but they only dropped 9% last year. While it was still a drop, it's flatlining a little bit in terms of the revenue. You know, there could potentially be a situation where it goes up, and it's not crazy to think that vinyl and CDs, those do really, really well with music artists. Why isn't it the same with film? And I think, again, it's this desire to have ownership over the product, again, especially in a digital streaming age, because I think a lot of streaming services are not only just raising their prices and confusing people and just really not putting out good original content, let's be honest, but also just, you know, the idea that a movie can just be taken away at any moment. It could be really annoying. I know I have most of the streaming services, and there's movies that you still can't find, and it's ridiculous. If I'm gonna buy it, I'd rather just go to the store and buy it on Blu-ray and buy it on DVD. Gen Z is looking for more art-led films, with interest in Marvel movies dropping to just 19% of the demographic of all the people who go to Marvel movies. Okay, that's a very slim margin whenever 40% of your entire domestic US box office is driven by Gen Z. And that shows, again, just kind of a switch in the demographics for these IPs. Obviously, having older IPs that still bring in that older audience is great, but again, it shows the difference in what movies really are taking off when it comes to the different kinds of films are going to cater for a certain demographic. And this is just my own 2 cents. I think Gen Z is really leaning more towards story that are the deconstruction of the hero's journey. I think that Gen Z likes a lot of more deconstructed stories and that are more focused on the soul of the story and what that means. I'm not saying I even necessarily agree with that, but I think that you see that, for instance, with Stranger Things, which is a very typical 80s happy ending, not being very well received. And I think it's because a lot of people had a different expectation. And I think it's just audiences in general expect different things and like different stories. And I think that Gen Z catered to the audience that doesn't really like that kind of hero's journey. That's, using a television show, but I think it definitely applies in the situation here of what we're discussing. So now you go, well, of course, it sounds like cinema's being saved, but I wager you this. Gen Alpha. Now, while I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, Gen Alpha is also going to the movies at a higher percentage rate than previous generations were going at their age. Insane to think about, because again, cinema is in a very good path right now, but I think what the end result comes down to is the next generation, because again, Gen Z remembers being analog and has a desire to return to that, but what about Gen Alpha? Will they feel that same way? Are they gonna go back to streaming? I can't predict tech. I especially don't know what's going on there. There's a lot going on with tech, and I think that's really driving away a lot of people who have lived for a very long time without tech. If you look at Gen Alpha, one of the huge pop culture moments that they've had really has been the Minecraft movie. And so again, it begs this question, is Gen Alpha going to find that same sense of community in film that Gen Z does? Interesting. I don't know. And then what kinds of movies are going to appeal to Gen Alpha? I think that that's really also another question. I think Gen Alpha will have a desire to go to the movies, but if you look at movies like Minecraft and try to gauge what kind of movies Gen Alpha will like, it's very different than the kinds of movies that Gen Z is seeing. And then also, Gen Alpha, will they love streaming? Having access just to movies right at their fingertips. Is that just not something that they're used to? Are they going also because their parents are taking them if Gen Z is going to the movies a lot? A lot of questions, again, that I don't know. This is just what I've gauged off of research that I've done, but I really do think that really the huge answer of this lies within if Gen Alpha's movie going habits will also follow along the same as Gen Z's. But how will Hollywood respond? Because you're seeing things like Stranger Things is not only the finale was released in theaters and did very well, mind you, but also they're releasing the animated show in theaters as well. They released K-pop Demon Hunters in theaters as well. And you're starting to see streaming services release more stuff in theaters, even though they said they never would. And it's because there's money there, which means that there's people who are wanting to go see stuff in the theater that they can see at home. And that is a huge game changer when it comes to this whole discussion. I think people do just want to leave their house, to be honest with you sometimes, and I think that that's just an easy thing to do. You can go and just be comfy at a movie theaters, and you're still out of your house, and you're having a shared experience. And I think that, I love the movie theater, so of course I'm a little bit biased, but I think that that's something that is really appealing to a lot of people. It's kind of a casual third space experience, but also, will Hollywood adapt to the new kinds of films? I think that they are. I'm not sure the old school studios kind of will. Warner Brothers is doing a great job adapting. They really pushed their IPs there whenever Disney was IP dominant, and they're starting to go back to original films. Just look at the Oscar contenders this year. They're doing very, very well. We'll see what happens with the Paramount merger. That's a whole separate conversation. But for instance, something like Disney, I think that they've failed to really create a lot of new moments as of recently. You have things like Inside Out 2 and Zootopia 2, which are amazing, and I think are sequels that are like old school good, like Toy Story 2 kind of good. But we haven't seen a lot of original films take off, although I mentioned also Hoppers did very, very well recently. What kind of films will continue? There is an audience that is ready to go to the movies, but will Hollywood respond to that properly, correctly, and in enough time to save movies? So the answer to is cinema dying is yes and no. Cinema as we know it, as it's been for like the last 10 years or so, is definitely dying. Stuff's just not working the same way as it was. Huge IPs like Indiana Jones are flopping at the box office. There's definitely a major shift in the type of films that are being made. But that doesn't mean that cinema as a whole is dying. Cinema is adapting. Will Hollywood adapt with its audience is the big question. I think that that's the point like Timothée Chalamet was trying to make as of recently. So it really just depends on the future of movie-going habits, future generations, if Hollywood will adapt to the shifting demographics and generations that are going to the movies, which Hollywood infamously never learns anything, so take that with what you will. But there also are shifts, and there's new companies. There's Neon, there's A24, there's, Warner Brothers is really making a comeback. A lot of original indie studios that are a part of these bigger studios, something like Searchlight, Focus Features for Universal, are also making a lot more money. You know, and again, that's important to have the smaller and the mid-budget movies fuel the ecosystem of the rest of the box office. So let me know what you thought about this video down below. Thank you so much for watching it. Please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. And thank you so much for watching. Peace out.